Here are the most important fitness tips that every beginner needs to know if they want to succeed in fitness. That is, build their dream physique, hit those strength gains, and overall build the confidence to be themselves and live a better life. Now with that said, no time to waste at all. I'm gonna get on to the first tip, and that is building your dream physique is a multi-year journey, meaning you shouldn't be focusing so much on these short-term things like, oh, why didn't I hit a PR today? Why do I feel like I'm not making any progress? Instead, you need to have a long-term perspective. Don't get caught up in all the sauce, which you probably know what I mean by sauce, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to be fit all the way up to my 90s, okay? I'm gonna be a century-old swole grandpa. Tip number 2 is a better physique doesn't necessarily equal a better mentor. I think we all know that one person that they can do whatever, right? They can literally stare at some weights and then all of a sudden build muscle. It seems like even though their form is atrocious, even though they're not even following their routine and their diet's awful, they can still get away with it, and they just have really good genetics when it comes to fitness. Now take that situation and extrapolate that towards the entire fitness industry on social media. There's a lot of people out here who have amazing looking physiques, right? They're super aesthetic, whatever it is, they're super strong. But when it comes to giving advice, you can say it is questionable at best. Now there's nothing wrong about giving advice on your personal experiences, but I think on the spectrum of bro science over here and science-based training over here, which is the best thing we have when it comes to research-backed training methods, you don't want to be too close to the bro science area, because I do hear a lot of bad advice that's given by people who have amazing physiques, right? Now I'm not gonna sit here and say that I have the best advice ever, although I do think it's pretty good, pretty actionable, it's pretty practical. However, I still caution you to always try to fact check what people like me or anyone else on social media talking about fitness is saying. Tip number 3 is treat fitness as more of a responsibility rather than a hustle. Meaning, focus on making fitness a part of your routine, kind of like brushing your teeth. You want it to be so habitual and so ingrained in your everyday life so that you're able to be as consistent as possible, which, as I would get into, is probably going to be the most important factor when it comes to seeing results long term. You have to be consistent, so instead of trying to feel like, you're looking at working out as kind of like a hustle, a means to an end, I'm only doing this so I can look good. No, you instead want to focus as more of a positive thing that can kind of elevate your life. I would say let fitness elevate your life, but don't make it your life. Make sure you're focusing on other aspects of your life, whether it be career, relationships, entrepreneurship, education, whatever it is. Fitness is a good supplement to that, but don't think of it as anything else. Okay, those were the more big picture, more guru-like tips, but trust me, it gets more practical. I'm gonna head to the gym and give you the remaining tips. All right, so we're at the gym now, as you can see, which brings me on to the workout related topics. Number 4th tip is gonna be do warm-up sets. I know a lot of people, especially if you're younger, you're probably thinking I'll be fine if I just hop in my working set. It's more efficient that way. But I would tell you long-term in your fitness journey, if you avoid doing warm-up sets and you just jump right into every single exercise you do, especially if you're dealing with heavy weight, think of a deadlift, barbell bench, this sort of thing, you're drastically increasing the chances of you getting injured. Now this may be obvious for something like a deadlift, but even for a machine exercise like this, I still like to take at least one warm-up set just so I get an understanding, okay, what's my strength looking like on the day? Am I gonna be going for a PR, or is that likely not gonna happen? Now the guidelines I give for warming up is, if you're doing a compound movement and it's your first exercise of the day, I recommend doing at least 3 warm-up sets, scaling up to your working weight. If you're doing an isolation movement, 1 warm-up set should suffice. But honestly, there's nothing stopping you from doing more. Be liberal with the amount of warm-up sets that you do, but be conservative with the amount of warm-up reps you do within a set, because you want to stay away from failure. Meaning on exercise like this, I might do 3 warm-up sets, but I'm only doing 1 to 4 reps within each set. And as the weight gets heavier, I do less warm-up reps. real quick. Able just released a new graphic tee line. This is one of the next prints, but I think they really nailed the fit down this time. It's like the right amount of oversized and not too big and draping. So this is a size medium. I'm 5'6", 135 pounds. So if you're interested in getting something like this, check out that new Able drop with the graphic tees. There's way more designs here. Put it on screen. Don't forget to use code PATH to get extra 10% off. So we're going on tip number 5, and that is good form is the foundation, but high effort / intensity is going to be the long-term driver of muscle growth. So what I mean by this is in the beginning, you want to focus on perfecting your form. So you're actually training the target muscle, in this case would be the side delts, and avoid the worst case situation, which is getting injured. Once you have your form down, merely just going through the motions is only gonna get you so far. Sure, you might reap some newbie gains in the beginning from just purely doing the exercise, but if you're trying to build muscle long term, you're gonna have to train hard. Take the set close to failure, if not all the way to failure on occasion. And once you notice that the exercise becomes easier with the same amount of reps and weight, that's when you're gonna wanna apply progressive overload either by adding reps, slowing the tempo down, or adding weight, of course. So the actionable tip there is first focus on form, but once you have that form down, focus on taking the set within an RIR of 3, or reps in reserve of 3. If you don't understand reps in reserve, it's essentially how many reps you have left in the tank at the end of your set. RIR 3 means you have 3 reps left, but if you went all the way to failure, that would be an RIR of 0. I consider an adequate working set to be within RIR 3, but generally I train closer all the way towards like the RIR of 1 or even to RIR 0 most times. If you do that and you progressive overload over time, you're gonna be putting yourself in the best position from a workout perspective to reap long-term gains.
So many things in the room, but I still miss you. And so many things bad for you. And I'm on this list, but I would die for you many times, and I don't think you would say.
Now, tip number 6 is you can't eat your way to building muscle. Now, I really like the way Dr. Eric Helms puts it, and that is diet plays a permissive role in building muscle, which means if you bulk but you don't lift consistently, you don't provide your body the stimulus, and that is lifting weights close enough to failure on a consistent basis, where you're also progressive overloading over time, you're not gonna be able to build muscle. And in a way, this kind of means that the most important thing that you should at least keep up with is working out consistently, which I think is good news, right? Because working out's the fun part. This should be the part that we easily can be consistent with. But you should also think of this as bulking without really knowing what you're doing in the gym, not following a cohesive routine, is kind of pointless because you're not gonna be able to reap the benefits of being in that calorie surplus if the stimulus isn't there. Thus, you should focus on optimizing your workout routine and being consistent in the gym before you decide to bulk, so that you can maximally reap the benefits of doing so. So tip number 8 now is that the 6 to 12 rep range is actually a really solid rep range. For some reason, it's like popular to hate on, oh, 3 sets to 12 is bad, blah, 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 but in reality, the 6 to 12 rep range, albeit a pretty big range, gives you a good balance of not too systemically fatiguing and wearing on your joints versus not too cardio intensive. Now keep in mind, you can build muscle at pretty much any rep range, but once you start going beyond like 15 reps, think of like doing a set of squats for 20 reps, cardiovascular fatigue becomes a limiting factor, because imagine doing that set, by the end of it, is it like, are you actually muscularly tired, or is it more that you're just kind of like out of breath? On the other hand, if you work consistently below the 5 rep range, granted that you're still training close enough to failure, you're gonna have to like full stack the weight table. And while there is advantages to working at that low rep range, it requires more warm-up times, technically increases the risk of injury if you're using something that's too heavy, because it's a lot easier to like, ego lift when you're working at a very low rep range. And of course, if your form isn't tip-top shape, it can be a little bit wearing on the joints. So I would say the majority of my working sets are done within the 6 to 12 rep range. I'm talking a good like 90–95% of those working sets I do is within the 6 to 12 rep range. 8 to 20 sets per muscle per week, ideally across 2 different workout days, that should be your bread and butter structure that you should default to. Okay, I'm pretty much done with this workout. It's time to get back to the crib. All right, so we're back at the crib. It's time to eat lunch. Show you guys what I'm eating. You see that? It's garlic chicken stir fry with mixed vegetables, of course. But now moving on to the more dieting related tips. Tip number 8 is you're gonna make the most progress within your first year of lifting, so choose your goal wisely. Now this relates to your diet because, so I like to think of this in the context of an RPG video game. In the beginning when you're starting out, you can choose one of 2 starting powers. One power will allow you to build muscle at an enormously rapid pace, faster than any other time in your fitness journey later on. Okay, that's the first power. The second power will allow you to build muscle and lose body fat at the same time at the most efficient rate you'll ever experience in your fitness journey. Now, to name those 2 starting powers, the first one I mentioned is known as a bulk. The second one I mentioned is known as a body recomp. Now remember, there's no correct choice, but based on your goals, one decision is probably going to be better than the other. It's kind of like a choose your adventure type deal. So my advice is if you're going to choose one, commit to it, don't ever look back. Also, don't get too wrapped up into the intricacies of things. If you're going to bulk, just focus on eating a little bit more than what you're normally doing right now. And then if you're going to body recomp, focus on eating a little bit less. At the end of the day, remember that consistency is going to be the most important thing. So if you're not consistent in the gym, none of this actually matters in the first place. So if you're struggling with consistency, I highly recommend you apply to my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program where I pretty much give you a custom workout program that is based off your schedule, so it always fits your schedule no matter what. I give you advice on nutrition and how to approach that, as that's usually a part that a lot of people struggle with. Now, these are some of the transformations my past clients have had, so if this motivates you to click the button below and apply, definitely do so. It's gonna be in the link in the description. Hope to see you in there. All right, tip number 9, this is a quick one. You shouldn't copy other people's macros, even if they have your dream physique. You see, there's still gonna be so much variation between individual to individual and what their total daily energy expenditure is, just because of genetics and honestly just different lifestyle habits. Honestly, every time I read in the comments, yo, what are your macros and calories? I wanna look like you. It honestly makes me cringe because it literally doesn't matter what I eat. It's not gonna be applicable to you. Now, I think the intuitive advice I give is good. I think if you're trying to diet, you probably wanna eat more vegetables and fruit and lean protein. And if you wanna bulk, you probably wanna eat more unprocessed, calorically dense foods. Think of like nuts and peanut butter, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when I see someone just ask me for my macros and calories, especially if they tell me because they wanna get into tracking, that information is practically useless. And knowing that they're newer in their journey overall as well, most likely they're not even gonna be tracking their calories correctly, because I would tell you, if you're gonna track calories, you need to be precise and use a food scale. If you're trying to eyeball and be like, okay, I think this is roughly like 1 serving of, orange chicken, it's probably gonna be inaccurate anyways. So if you're a beginner and asking around what people's calories are, don't do that. And lastly, tip number 10, and probably the best tip I can give when it comes to dieting, don't be over restrictive on your diet. It's kind of ironic because I'm literally eating stir fry without rice, but hey, I don't always eat like this, okay? Because at the end of the day, we have to be in it for the long term. Now sure, you might not be dieting as hard once you get to the body fat percentage that you want, but there's gonna be a reverse dieting process, and then afterwards, you still have to eat relatively clean, right? So doing something like keto, OMAD, carnivore, just something very restrictive is probably not gonna be sustainable in the long term. You wanna follow something like the 80-20 rule, which a lot of people misunderstand that rule, by the way. It's not that 80% of your diet should be good, 20% should be bad, because there's no such things as bad food. The correct interpretation of the 80-20 rule is that of all the decisions you can make about your diet, what you should be eating, all that kind of stuff, 20% of those decisions that are good will yield 80% or the majority of the results, meaning you're gonna get freaking swole and all that stuff. In my opinion, that 20%, if you're dieting or body recomping, is 1, prioritizing lean sources of protein, 2, eating more vegetables and fruit, 3, drinking more water, 4, actively decreasing the amount of junk food you eat, and 5, simply moving more, because again, calorie deficit is a 2-sided equation. And then if you're bulking, you can modify that a little bit. Number 1 is prioritize lean sources of protein. 2, replace the highly processed, highly refined snacks with unprocessed, calorically dense foods such as nuts. And 3, drinking water. And 4, you still want to move even though you're trying to be in a caloric surplus. It's probably going to help you work up your appetite anyways. Now, on the contrary to that, the 80% that you don't need to think of, especially if you're a beginner, is 1, exactly what amount of calories do I need to consume per day in order to be at my maintenance? Do I need to eat low carb, low fat? Now, what other supplements should I be taking? Now, you don't need to take any supplements, but if you're going to take one, I recommend protein powder and creatine. That's it. Do I need to follow a meal plan in order to get the amount of calories I need? Like, no, you can probably do it intuitively. What time should I be eating? How often should I be consuming protein before and after my workout? What exact meal plan do I need to follow in order to build muscle? Like, no, you don't need to do any of that. And to be honest, I always think of meal plans as more of like meal inspiration. So when I say meal plan in my coaching program, it's not like a super rigid meal plan, like at 8 a.m. you need to eat this, then at noon you have to eat this. No, you get a bunch of recipes that are good examples of, okay, this is roughly what you should be eating. Then if you really want to tweak it a bit, I give you the go ahead to do that, right? Like, I think doing things more intuitively, especially when you're a beginner, is probably a good idea when it comes to dieting because it's just easier to stick to. And then as long as you're consistent with the 20% I mentioned, as well as training consistently, you will eventually make substantial progress from where you're at now. And then from there, you're gonna be hooked. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope these 10 tips you really take to heart. As I will tell you, you don't really need to focus on much else. 10 tips is a good amount of tips. So maybe watch this video through again. It helps with watch time, but jokes aside, it is probably good to watch this video again to kind of digest all the information in here because I did give some gold nuggets here. And all I ask you to do is leave a like, hit subscribe to level up your physique, and hit the bell notification so you can get these videos right as they come. I do a premiere on these videos every single time, so if you want to catch me in the chat answering your questions, you're definitely going to want to hit that bell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.